Hello, and welcome to this brief clip in which we will give an overview of your role as scientific chair for an FWO fellowship panel. In this video, we give an overview of the tasks you have as chair of one of our expert panels. These tasks include advising FWO on panel composition, distributing the applications to the appropriate panel members, reviewing proposals, chairing the panel meetings, following up on feedback, and finally, assessing the reports on ongoing and recently completed projects. First, we'll cover your duties in the panel composition. As a member of the Domain Council, your task in the composition of the panel is to help FWO in the selection of new panel members. First, FWO identifies the open places in the panel, which are created by panel members reaching the end of their term, leaving the panel, or having a conflict of interest that prevents them from serving in the panel this call. Secondly, FWO asks you to select suitable new experts for the open places in the panel. Ideally and most frequently, experts are selected from the FWO Review College. This is a set of experts who have applied for panel membership and are therefore interested in serving and who have made it through FWO's rigorous scientific screening process. We will send you a list of the members of the Review College for your panel, including an overview of the expertise of each member of the college in relation to the expertise needed in the panel. You will also have access to their CVs, and this should allow you to make an appropriate selection for a new panel member. Several rules apply to the selection of new panel members and the panel composition. The most important consideration is the appropriate distribution of expertise in the panel. It is crucial that the panel covers the expertise areas that it is supposed to cover. This is listed in the so-called expertise matrix. The first consideration in selecting a new member for the panel is always to think about how they would contribute to the expertise already present in the panel and which gaps they can fill. Secondly, we aim to have international panels, so the majority of panel members should not be affiliated to a research institution in Flanders. In practice, this usually means that at most 5 out of 12 panel members may have Flemish affiliations. In recent years, we have generally seen the number of Flemish members in the panels go down. To be clear, FWO does support the selection of Flemish members and finds it valuable that experts with knowledge about the local research landscape are part of the panel. Another consideration in selecting new panel members is the gender balance in the panel. In line with international trends, we aim to have at least 1/3 of the members of the underrepresented gender. Typically, this will mean that in a panel of 12 members, we should have at least 4 women. Institutional diversification is also important, which is why we aim to not have more than 2 members from the same institution in the panel. This applies to Flemish as well as international institutions. Finally, an expert can serve only in one panel at the same time, so you have to make sure that the expert you select is not already selected for another panel. The FWO staff will help you keep track of this. FWO also asks you to take sustainability into account in selecting new experts, but only if it is not to the detriment of the panel. As you can see on this slide, we have formulated a guideline in this regard that requires that you give preference to a European expert, that is, someone located relatively closely to Brussels, if and when you have to make the choice between experts with a very similar profile but located in different locations. To be clear, this consideration does not take precedence over the importance of adding the appropriate expertise to the panel and achieving gender balance, but it should play a role if other important parameters of panel member selection are covered. The selection process begins with an email from the FWO informing you of the open places in the panel, the current panel composition, and an overview of the Review College. For both the members of your panel and the Review College, you will have information about their expertise as mapped onto the panel's expertise matrix. That is the set of topics that the panel must have expertise on. Here you see an example of what the Review College document looks like. At the top, you have the current composition of first the fellowship panel and below this the projects panel. This gives you information about the expertise currently present in the panel as well as the gender and institutional balance. Lower in the document, below the yellow line, you see the members of the review college, that is the candidate panel members. For these experts, you also see their expertise mapped on the expertise matrix of the panel, as well as their gender and institutional information. Additionally, in column A of the document, you may see the codes of other panels or references to earlier appointments of these experts in FWO panels. This information is there for administrative follow-up. Experts remain in our review college for 3 years. They are ordered on the basis of the year in which they apply. Typically, we would recommend that you first consider the experts who responded to the most recent call, as they have most recently expressed interest in serving in the panel. But you can always select people from earlier years as well. And you should indeed do so if expertise, gender, sustainability, or other concerns prompt you to. We use color coding in this document to indicate to you experts who are no longer available for selection. In short, any expert whose name is colored is not available for selection because they have already been selected for another panel. Any expert whose name is still white may be selected for your panel. Considering all relevant parameters, you then formulate an advice to FWO for the selection of new panel members. In doing so, please also consider the broader CV of an expert. For all candidates who applied in the most recent calls, CVs are available on the FWO extranet. For experts who applied in earlier years, you may of course look up additional information online. Should an expert with the appropriate profile not be present in the review college, we can seek external candidates. While FWO prefers to work with members from the review college, appointing external members is possible, certainly if expertise or gender considerations require this. Your advice on the selection of new members is then presented to the full panel for feedback. Please note that the panel does not have access to the complete review college, but they may formulate advice on the profile of the sought-after expert. Once the panel has come to an agreement on whom to select for the open places, the members are invited by FWO. Panel composition typically starts in October and runs until April. The main panel should be completed by January, when the evaluation of the postdoctoral call begins. In the course of December and early January, we may still have to replace panel members who act as supervisors or co-supervisors of applications submitted to the panel. The evaluation of the PhD call begins in April. Replacement of panel members involved in applications submitted to the panel are typically done in March. A second important task of the chair is to distribute the proposal across all panel members. As a first step in the evaluation procedure, FWO will request all panel members to check the list of submitted applications and indicate potential conflicts of interest. Additionally, FWO will ask panel members to indicate how familiar they are with the topic of the proposed project. We provide you with these so-called levels of confidence in order to facilitate the distribution of the review duties across panel members. When distributing the applications, we ask you to consider potential conflicts of interest, the indicated confidence rates, and to ensure the workload is distributed more or less evenly across the panel. Although the number of reviewers for the PhD and the postdoc program is the same, the reviewers' tasks differ significantly between the programs. Allow us to elaborate on these differences. For the postdoctoral program, 2 panel members will write a regular review, in parallel with 2 on-topic external reviewers. A third panel member, the so-called rapporteur, will write at a later stage a report that integrates these 4 reviews. At the same time, the rapporteur will also suggest a score for the proposal, which will form the basis for the discussion with the panel and which will of course be subject to amendment. The rapporteur will act as a spokesperson for the application in the panel and will also be responsible for the final feedback. As you, as scientific chair, will be requested to guide the panel discussion, we ask you to avoid being rapporteur unless circumstances require this. Combining your role as chair with the role of rapporteur may complicate your position during the panel discussion. We do, however, strongly encourage you to take up the role of internal evaluator for multiple postdoc applications. In contrast to the procedure for the postdoctoral program, for the PhD program, the pre-selected reviewers are equivalent. The score for the proposal at the start of the pre-selection meeting is determined by the average reviewer score rather than assigned by one single rapporteur. One of the 3 reviewers will, however, be responsible for the feedback. Please take this additional workload into account when distributing the PhD applications. The distribution of the applications for the postdocs will need to be completed in the second half of January. Given the very strict time schedule of this evaluation procedure, please complete this task as soon as you receive the invitation to do so. The allocation of the proposals for the PhD fellowships will need to take place in the second half of April. Emails by the FWO administration will help you to keep track of the necessary deadlines and allocation procedures. Another task of the chair is to review proposals. In order to get a fair distribution of the workload and match applications to the member with the most on-topic expertise, scientific chairs usually also review some applications themselves. We do advise that you perhaps distribute fewer applications to yourself so that you remain available to cover unexpected gaps in that panel when members are forced to drop out in the course of the review process due to unforeseen circumstances. Next, let's talk about your responsibility in chairing the panel meetings. As a scientific chair, you will chair both the pre-selection and the interview meetings. The pre-selection meeting is held online and serves to select candidates who will be invited for the interview. In preparation of this meeting, the administrative chair will share a preliminary ranking, including and based on all the scores that were assigned to the applications. During a short preliminary meeting or via email, you will discuss this ranking and the scores of the applications, determining which applications certainly need to be discussed in the pre-selection meeting because of, for example, their position in the ranking, divergences in scores, or other reasons. Issues regarding out-of-scope proposals, potential conflicts of interest, double funding, or bench fees should also be discussed. The preliminary ranking and instructions on how to prepare for the pre-selection meeting will be sent to all panel members prior to the meeting. During the pre-selection meeting itself, you will guide the discussion. Depending on what you agreed on with the administrative chair, you may choose to briefly touch upon the highest and lowest ranked projects in order to proceed almost immediately to the proposals with deviating scores between the reviewers or applications near the cutoff line. For each project, you should work towards reaching a consensus score that is in accordance with the score grid for each criterion. At the end of the meeting, you will need to have selected the best candidates to be invited for interview. The interview meeting is held physically in our Brussels office and your in-person presence is required. You will guide the scientific discussion after the candidate presented their research. During the interview meeting, you are assisted by the administrative chair and the account administrator. The administrative chair will make sure that everything proceeds according to FWO's regulations and that the score grid is applied correctly. Indeed, the scoring needs to be done in accordance with the appropriate score grid. We therefore ask you to familiarize yourself with the score grid well ahead of the meeting, to apply it yourself at all times, and to monitor that other panel members apply it as well. All decisions are taken in consensus by the panel. Therefore, please make sure to involve the entire panel in all important decisions, such as scoring and the final ranking. FWO's application forms include a section on parallel applications. Project proposals can be submitted to different calls, but FWO evidently does not allow exactly the same research activities to be funded twice. Should any issue arise with a specific application, the administrative chair will bring this up during the preparatory meeting. The panel may subsequently be asked to assess the potential overlap between the parallel applications. After the pre-selection and the interview meeting, we expect panel members to prepare the feedback for the applicants. After the panel members have submitted the feedback, FWO will screen this for typos, inappropriate language, etc. The administrative chair will also verify whether the feedback indeed substantiates the scores and provides sufficient explanation for the funding decision. If this is not the case, the administrative chair may get in touch with you to obtain additional information and input for the feedback. One of the roles of the panel is also to assess the progress of ongoing and completed projects. To assess whether FWO funding was used effectively, FWO fellows are asked to submit an interim or ex post report. These reports should include an overview of the research activities that they have performed. As a scientific chair, you will need to assess these reports. After reading the reports, we expect you to suggest a score for each report and to provide some comments for the beneficiaries, if required. Your suggested scores and comments will then be shared with the panel, who can respond. The entire procedure will be performed online. The reports will not be discussed during the panel meeting. In the assessment of scientific reports, you can use one of two available scores: approved and insufficient. A score of approved is given to reports in which the initial goals, which were put forward in the proposal, have been reached. For PhD fellows, an important outcome is a successful defense of their PhD thesis. If this has been achieved already or will be achieved within a reasonable time frame, the report can be approved without further ado. A score of insufficient can be given to reports which do not show sufficient proof that the intended intermediate or final goals have been met. Keep in mind that assigning a score of insufficient can have serious consequences for the beneficiaries, and the decision to award such a score should not be taken lightly. Therefore, such a score needs to be thoroughly substantiated and may warrant discussion with the administrative chair. Depending on whether a score of insufficient was awarded to an interim or an ex post report, the consequence is that funding may be stopped or that a new application by the beneficiary may be impacted negatively. The head of the university where the beneficiary is working will also be informed about the panel's decision to award a score of insufficient to the report. The evaluation of the scientific reports happens between January and March. As scientific chair, you will receive FWO's request to assess these reports mid-January. By the end of March, the assessment should be completed, including potential amendments of your initial score by the panel. Before we go and conclude this video, we want to remind you that all panel discussions, including discussions between the scientific chair and administrative chair, and all documents related to the panel are strictly confidential. Relevant information that can increase the transparency of decisions should be included in the feedback to the applicant and will be communicated at the end of the procedure. Should you be approached by an applicant or their supervisor, please refer them to the FWO and refrain from further communicating with them. Please also inform FWO that you have been contacted by the applicant or their supervisor. This concludes the video on chairing an FWO fellowship panel. Should you have any further questions, do not hesitate to contact your account administrator or administrative chair.